everyone, welcome back. We're going to do a follow-up on the hip flexor stretch concept. There's going to be one more exercise wanted to make sure to cover in detail. So a lot of you probably would have seen this exercise or some variation of it before. What I'm going to talk about is how to maximize the efficiency of it. And this is a stretch that I first was introduced to in its form that I'm going to show you at the RKC kettlebell certification. So a lot of these concepts are going to be adapted from that, just for full disclosure, credit where credit is due. A lot of the concepts are going to come directly from Pavel, and if you don't know who that is related to kettlebells, just Google Pavel and kettlebells. Once again, giving credit where credit is due, really adapted a lot of what I'm going to talk about and made it easy for me to understand, easy to apply, and easy to teach. So for hip flexors, again for follow-up, we talked about athletic movements and how basically if you can't move your hips freely, it's going to inhibit anything you're doing. The analogy that Pavel always used to give is that if you're trying to do anything athletic or lift weights with tight hip flexors, it's the equivalent of driving with the parking brake on. So to translate that into athletic terms, if you're trying to hit a golf ball with tight hip flexors and you cannot fully extend your hips, there's going to be a sticking point where you can't really do the swing properly. Same thing with running, jumping, deadlifting, as we've talked about. So with this particular stretch, here's how we're going to apply that concept to make sure that we're really adding another layer to lengthening those muscles and increase the range of motion in the hip joint. So this is going to be a kneeling stretch. So if your knees bother you or you have a hard surface, get yourself a pillow, get yourself something to set up here. If the stretch is painful, it's not really going to be helping. So essentially it's going to be, the base of it is going to be in a lunge position. So the leg that you're trying to stretch is going to be back. And essentially you want to have a starting point where you can comfortably be up tall, hands on your hips. And the stretch is going to be same concept of lengthening here. You want to lengthen this muscle group. It's just going to give you a little bit of extra leverage to come forward. So forward, hold for about 3, come back, rest, stretch, come back. So some common pitfalls that you can run into when doing this stretch is to have a bad setup position. So if you're trying to stretch your right hip and you've got your front foot here, you're really not going to be doing that. So you could be coming forward, have a bad position for this knee, but you're really not putting this right hip in a position to stretch that flexor. On the other extreme, if you step out too far and you're thinking, I'm really stretching my hip flexor, you're going to find that you're not in this case because you're spending all your energy trying to increase the length of your stance, but you're not actually accomplishing the goal of stretching this back hip flexor. So again, proper setup, you want to be able to be up tall. If you have to strain to come forward, that's not a good position. You might want to start with a standing variation until you can comfortably get in this starting position. And really it's all about going forward and lengthening this muscle group. So you might find as you do a set, maybe you do 5, 10, maybe you need to increase the length of the starting position. You say, okay, I can actually step forward and I feel that. Come back. Maybe if you start off too far, you feel more tension, you're not feeling a stretch in the hip flexor, you want to come back and adjust it. It's really all about making sure that you're in a comfortable position. Again, get something so that your knee isn't going to bother you and that's not going to be a point to inhibit the stretch. Make sure that your stance enables you to properly do the range of motion, and you want to feel a comfortable stretch in the area that you're targeting. So you want to feel a comfortable stretch in your hip flexor. If you're feeling tension in your back, if you're feeling tension in your opposite leg, you probably need to adjust your stance a little bit. So again, this is something that you can build up to potentially if it's not an exercise you're familiar with. I hope that the drills and troubleshooting will help you adjust this to its true purpose. Sometimes, you hear about lunge stretches, hip flexor stretch. This one in particular really hit home for me when it came to, okay, if you need to lock out your deadlift, if you need to have a proper extension at the top of your swing, if you're doing anything athletic, you need to be able to freely move your hips, and in particular your hip flexors. And this is one way to move in that direction. So this is something that I do if I'm preparing to do any sort of deadlift with a barbell, do any kettlebell exercises, just to make sure that my hips have the concept of making sure we get full extension and we're prepared to do the exercise. So hopefully this series on the hip flexors has been helpful. Thanks so much. See you next time.